In August of 2021, in Edmonton, Alberta, someone spray painted in red the words actual Nazi on a bust of Roman Shukhevych, a military leader who collaborated with Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime during the Second World War. Now, at the same time, someone also vandalized a monument in St. Michael's Cemetery, also in Edmonton, which honors the 14th Waffen SS Division, a World War II military unit of the Nazi Party. My next guest has been arrested and charged with the vandalism of these two monuments and statues, and if convicted, he faces up to 10 years in prison. Duncan Kinney is a journalist with Progress Alberta, and he has pleaded not guilty to these mischief charges related to the vandalism and is awaiting his day in court. His experience with these charges includes extensive police surveillance, leaks by the Edmonton Police Commission, and even accusations and then a retraction by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Duncan Kinney, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Desmond. And it's another beautiful day in Edmonton, the only city in Canada with two separate monuments to Nazi collaborators, or a 14th or a Waffen SS division. So yeah.
A distinction that we really must talk about during the course of this interview, and I promise we will. But I kind of want to start with this wild story about your arrest and the things that led up to you being arrested and charged with this vandalism of these two Nazi monuments in Edmonton. So, first of all, you're a journalist, and this all seems to have started in early 2022 when you were trying to attend a meeting of the Edmonton Police Service, and you found out you weren't able to attend. Can we start with that? Why were you not able to attend this meeting in early 2022?
Yeah, it was still COVID times, allegedly, and it was a Zoom press conference, and it was a press conference that was being hastily called and assembled because the day before an Edmonton police officer had shot not one but two people to death. One of them being a someone who was just like a civilian, like just in their apartment building. So that was the context. And then I was trying to get into this press conference to ask questions, as a journalist does, and I was refused entry. And then a few days later, I learned I was refused entry because my media credentials were under review. Why my media credentials were under review, more 2.5 years later, no explanation has ever been offered. This media credential review process has never been explained. It's never happened to anyone else. But there is a possible reason for why my media credentials were under review, which is that a couple of weeks prior to that press conference, there had been a press conference where Edmonton Chief of Police, Dale McPhee, was kind of essentially going in front of the public and saying, the convoy stuff was happening. There was every weekend, trucks were flooding downtown Edmonton. They were leaning on their horns. It was just really crappy and really shitty, and nothing was being done about it. And Chief McPhee called a press conference and was like saying, Edmonton police are doing a great job. We're not going to change anything. Essentially just like doing a victory lap for some reason when, everyone was pissed at him. And I had a bit of an exchange with him about, you're proud of nothing changing, like you're not going to do anything. And then there was a bit of a sarcastic back and forth. And that was the end of it. And then a few weeks later, I learned that, my media credentials are under review. Why? No reason given. And that means that I'm not allowed to attend police press conferences. They won't answer my questions. Not that it stops me from reporting on the police. Obviously, I can still read their reports. I can still go to police commission meetings. I can still track down the chief in public when he is in public and ask him a question. But it does mean that the official police kind of media communications apparatus was no longer going to be used to answer any of my questions. And so that was the start of it.
But as far as you know at this time, besides your credential review, you have no business with the Edmonton Police and you're just continuing to do your work.
I am an independent journalist doing accountability journalism. I end up doing a lot of journalism about the police. I think during this time, or in this in this year as well, I think I read a story which is pretty embarrassing, which is the Edmonton Police had a secret surveillance plane that they had kept secret for more than 20 years. They never told anyone about, and I reported on it. I exposed it, and the only reason it even came out that that they had this plane for 20 years was that they were going and asking for more money for a new surveillance plane, which was going to cost, whatever. I can't remember the exact dollar figure, but several millions of dollars. and and it just kind of came out in this weird kind of little known like process between city council and the police, where they're like, you need how many millions for a plane? It's a replacement. And so, anyways, that happened roughly around the same time. Neither here nor there, but just kind of an example of what happens when a journalist just pays attention to what the police are doing.
Now, I understand that you got a lawyer regarding your credentials being taken away. You really wanted to be able to continue to report on an official capacity on the police, go to their events and whatnot.
Also
And
believed it was just simply unfair and ridiculous. And so, yeah, I did hire a lawyer to help me with this credential review process. Yeah.
right. And so your lawyer is going back and forth for weeks with a lawyer with the police being like, what's happening with this credential review? What's going on? Could we get more information? And then at some point, uh, it's been now many weeks, a couple of months really. And your lawyer reaches out to the police lawyer and says, hey, we haven't heard anything about Duncan's credential review. What's the status of that? What happened after your lawyer made that request?
Yeah, 3 days later, after my lawyer reaches out to the chief of police lawyer saying, hey, what's the status of the review, I am arrested and charged with these two charges. Yeah. And it had been months of begging essentially from the chief of police's lawyer to try and get me to submit to a like sit down interview between myself and the police with regards to like this credential review. And this whole time we were like, we're happy to participate in your review process. Just send us the questions. We'll get you the answers. They were like, no, it is absolutely incredibly integral. The only way it can happen is if you come in for a sit down interview. And like time and time again, my lawyer was like, no. And time again, they kept asking. And then they got frustrated with the fact that I guess we weren't submitting to this process. My lawyer sends in a like, hey, where are we at? And then, yeah, 3 days later, I am arrested.
And after your arrest and trying to put things together afterwards, what did you then conclude about these repeated requests for you to come into the police for an interview?
It certainly seems suspicious. The fact that the police were so insistent on trying to get me into a room, trying to get me to show up to a room full of police officers to talk for an interview about the about the accreditation process, which again, they never like have given any reason. Like they never give a reason publicly anywhere about why my credentials were suspended, why I was under review, what sin that I had committed that was so egregious that like for the first time ever in the history of the Edmonton Police Services, you had stripped the media credentials of a journalist. No explanation was ever offered, but they were like, oh yeah, trust our process. We come in for an interview. And they were like, we're happy to submit, happy to answer any questions you may have. Please send them in writing. Not good enough.
So you were arrested and you were charged with these two mischief charges for allegedly vandalizing these two monuments to Nazi collaborators. So now you were able to get some disclosure and to learn about some quite shocking things in terms of the amount of police surveillance that had been happening to you and to your family in the time leading up to your arrest. We learned, for example, that there was a 6-man surveillance squad on you that put in over 181 man hours of surveillance into you before you were arrested. Duncan, can you
five different 6-man squads, spread out over 7 different times, spread out over 8 months. Sorry, I interrupted you. Get to your question.
No, I got it wrong. So it's not one 6-man surveillance squad. It's 5 different 6-man surveillance squads.
Correct. Yeah.
I have to just ask you, what's the impact of you of learning that this was what was going on to you and your family for all this time?
It's hard to say. I mean, it is difficult to contemplate the fact that there were just these police officers watching me for hours and hours and hours, essentially like walk to work. They took pictures of my family. I think the thing that disturbed me the most were the surveillance of my family and the fact that they had pictures of my child and my partner. That I struggle to understand what investigative value taking pictures, sitting outside my house and taking pictures of my partner and child provide to a criminal investigation. That was probably the thing that got me the most. I mean, if they want to spend their time following me to work, go off, I guess. But like, it's it's an insane amount of resources to use. I am just a journalist. I cover the police. I don't go to court every often. I'm not covering criminal trials all the time, but I did talk to a police officer, a former police officer, 25-year veteran of the EPS, Dan Jones. He teaches um, on policing issues and criminal justice issues at Northwest College here in Edmonton. And I told him about that, and he was blown away by the fact that so many police resources were used in my investigation. And you look at the numbers, and it is hard not to look at them and be gobsmacked at just how much time and resources and money was put into taking following me to work or whatever.
I like to share a comment that your lawyer made about this in pretrial submissions. I'm going to quote him. He said, quote, "It should be self-evident that the enormous police resources poured into the EPS investigation about spray painting memorials to the Nazi Waffen SS and one of the collaborators, which was removed by use of a garden hose, can only be explained by the EPS's motivation to charge and see convicted a critic of the EPS," unquote. Now, Duncan, you obviously have pled not guilty and are waiting for your day in court as relates to these, mischief charges. You have, however, reported before on the bust of Shukhevych, and I believe also of this Nazi SS Waffen SS monument that's in the cemetery. What's your interest in reporting on these two monuments that are in Edmonton?
I mean, when I discovered that the city that I live in and that I've lived in for the past 15 years had not one but two monuments to people who participated in the Holocaust, who swore an oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler, I was dismayed and distressed, as I think most people would be. I think the lessons of World War II are pretty basic. Who the bad guys are pretty basic. Um, you know, the Nazis were bad. The Nazis committed the Holocaust. The Nazis were who Canada fought against in World War II. Yet here in Edmonton, we have a monument to a Nazi police division in the 14th Waffen SS, and a monument to a Nazi collaborator who not only wore a uniform and participated in the Holocaust in Belarus in the Nachtigall Battalion, but then later went on to commit as leader of the Ukrainian insurgent army, later went on to commit a genocide called the Volyn massacre, where allegedly or around 100,000 Poles were killed by Ukrainian nationalist forces at the kind of end of World War II. And you learn this history, and I think that's newsworthy. As a journalist, I think more people should know about this. Like, I don't think anyone who learns about this isn't going to be shocked, isn't going to be outraged. And so, yes, I have reported on it multiple times. I had written about not only the fact of their existence, but of things like the fact that they had received government money, at least the one institution that had the bust of Roman Shukhevych outside of it. They had received money from I can't remember, the federal government, I think, for improving their security. They had been, when they had been founded, it was, I think there was government money that has been flowing to these organizations for many, many years. So I've been reporting on that. And I think it's newsworthy when any level of government is giving money to an organization that has a bust of a Nazi collaborator who participated in the Holocaust outside of their building. I think that is newsworthy. And so that's my interest in it as a journalist. And so I'd reported on it over the years.
I think what's interesting for people who don't know that those two monuments exist in Edmonton is that there's a pattern of this kind of veneration of Nazis and Nazi collaborators within this country at a kind of shocking official level. We've been seeing reporting from a journalist named David Pugliese, who's been talking a lot about not constructed yet, but it's overdue and over budget. It's a $7.5 million monument, and it's in name, it is devoted to victims of communism. However, Pugliese's reporting and the reporting of others has demonstrated how, once again, people who would be named in this monument are actually collaborators with the Nazi regime. Why do you think this keeps happening in our country?
Yeah, you've got the Victims of Communism Monument. You've got the Deschênes Commission with this list of 900 alleged Nazi war criminals who came to Canada that the federal government refuses to release. You've got these two monuments in Edmonton. You've got another monument to the 14th Waffen SS that I think was taken down in Oakville just only recently. Yeah, I mean, I think this the historic reasons for why Ukrainian nationalists participated in the Holocaust and collaborated with the Nazis, and then how so many of them came to Canada, whether they were not Waffen SS veterans or whether they were simply kind of believers in the cause or believed that their cause was just or righteous. It doesn't really matter. Like, they were established, they became essentially with the help of the federal government, they essentially became and were installed as the official kind of voices of Ukrainian diasporic communities here in Canada, even though prior to their arrival after World War II, there was a rich history of kind of left wing and even communist Ukrainian organizing and institutions. Like, one of the reasons why we have national healthcare in this country is because of like Ukrainians in like rural Alberta and Saskatchewan setting up their own kind of mutual aid hospitals. Uh, I know Tommy Douglas kind of gets set up as this like founder of it, but you can't talk about that without them as well. And those voices of those Ukrainians who, were largely working class, were largely left wing, they were essentially diminished, and they even had their like institutions taken over with the help of the federal government. Um, and the federal government also had a very kind of like vested interest in bringing the Ukrainian nationalists over, bringing Nazi collaborators over, because they were reliably anti-communist. The big enemy in the late 1940s and the early 50s were the communists. It wasn't the Nazis. The Nazis had been defeated. And so various state level institutions were happy to bring in, Waffen SS veterans and Nazi collaborators because, the real enemy was uh, you know, the Red Menace, the commies. And you could definitely, if there was anyone who you could trust to be a reliably anti-communist, it would be, someone who collaborated with the Nazis, uh, someone whose whole ideology is bent on destroying kind of like Soviet communism. And so that is how Canada ended up with, with this Victims of Communism memorial that is, the bureaucrats say is definitely for sure going to have names of Nazi collaborators on it. Or you have this government refusing to list a name, like a 30, 40-year-old report at this point, refusing to release the names of 900 alleged Nazi war criminals. They're just refusing to release it. This is why we have two monuments here in Edmonton. This is why we had that monument in Oakville. And it's not just the Ukrainian community as well. There's been other reporting by David Pugliese on like a veneration in like at some summer camp outside of Toronto, where they were venerating Estonian Nazi collaborators. Like, it's not just a Ukrainian problem. There are various kind of Eastern European diasporic communities that have never really had to reckon with their involvement in the Holocaust and their collaboration with the Nazi regime because they were able to come to Canada and all sins were forgiven.
Now, when we speak about David Pugliese and his work, we saw a backlash against him for reporting on this so-called Victims of Communism memorial. Somebody named Chris Alexander, who is a former Conservative MP, went to a House of Commons committee and he accused David Pugliese, who is exposing these things in his reporting, just as you've been doing. Alexander accused him of being a Soviet intelligence asset, excuse me. Obviously, Pugliese has denied this, and I want to be full in my disclosure that I have signed a letter that was written by Taylor C. Noakes, an independent journalist, uh, that condemned Chris Alexander for going into a House of Commons committee where you are protected for the things that you say and
Yeah.
making accusations against Pugliese that he is some kind of Soviet Russian asset, but would not repeat those things outside of his House of Commons committee. I think that what he has done to Pugliese, and I also think quite frankly, Duncan, what you're experiencing are examples of people seeming to want to silence journalism that they don't like by using the criminal justice system, by using chambers of the House of Commons where they can say whatever they want without being prosecuted or sued for libel. And I think that this has a chilling effect on our ability as journalists to report on things that matter. So I wanted to be clear in my disclosure about that. But obviously, being dragged through the courts like this for you is not only, I'm sure, traumatic and frustrating, but it's expensive. And you have been trying to fundraise in order to mount this legal defense for yourself. And I want you to end today by telling people about your fundraising effort.
Yeah, so we're 25 months in. That's a long time. I have an incredible lawyer. Tom Engel is my lawyer. I have much respect for him. He has done incredible work defending me. But the costs are starting to mount. As anyone who has ever been charged with anything knows that, and anyone who's ever had to pay for lawyers for anything knows that the costs do mount. And so I do have a legal defense fund that I'm raising money for. I'm currently, I think the goal is currently about almost 40, 50, 60% met. It's in there right now. It is moving up fast. People are hearing my story. People are donating. So if you listen to any of this and you think that what happened to me needs to be fought back against, then I would really encourage you to help me out, help my family out, kick in a few bucks into the legal defense fund. Um, yeah, if I've got another week of pretrial coming up in December, I'm allegedly supposed to have a trial in April, which would put me at around 30 some months, which is right around the limit of where you're supposed to have a trial. And there is a charter protected right about getting access to a speedy trial, just as an aside. But yes, I'm sure there will be a link in this show notes or however you're going to get to it. But please, it's GoFundMe. Kick in a few dollars. I'd be very, very grateful.
I certainly will be putting a link to that in all the ways that we share this story, Duncan. And while I was speaking earlier about disclosure, I think people should also know that you and I met many years ago in Alberta, and
Yeah.
you were very kind enough to take me around the province while I was doing some work around carding. So you are somebody that I know. You are somebody whose work I have used many times and that I value. And people can take that in the context of my reporting here in whatever way that they'd like to. But I am deeply concerned about what is happening to you. And I think that people should be paying attention to it. And hopefully, if people would like to support you, now they've heard your story and can do so. So thank you very, very much for joining me today.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Desmond.
My pleasure.